Hello and welcome back to Beyond the Veil background information. We're doing a creature profile this time and we're still on the sea creatures, although we're on the last couple of ones, and this time we're going to be doing about a really interesting one called the Ponaturi. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but they're often touted as a vampiric species, so they're an interesting one to discuss. So as always, I'll have a little quote from somewhere where I mention them, discuss what background information I have about them, and then give you a creature profile for how they appear in the fiction. So let's get into it. So wait, those things are actually what dragged the people to the shore from shipwrecks? I thought they took you and made you a servant or lived in the deep trenches. A quote from Reciprocity. A very curious collection of goblin-like beings in Polynesian, specifically Maori folklore, are the Ponaturi, often accompanied by kenai, a grey melon fish of a sort, at least in one translation. These are a curiously unusual folk that have been linked to goblins and even vampires in some senses, and are certainly very interesting and very unique. I also apologise in advance if I pronounce anything wrong. I'm trying, but not too sure I'm doing it right. So the Ponaturi are recognised as a bunch of evil spirits that live in the water off the coast. They fear the sunlight but can climb up onto land in the night. This is probably where the vampire-like is sometimes seen, as to protect yourself from a Ponaturi or escape them is to trick them into stepping out into the sunlight where they are destroyed. Described as having skin that glowed and long talons on each finger in some, and also red hair, white skin, and long evil claws being the main thing, they're certainly interesting. They also seemingly fear fire, meaning perhaps all light affected them. Some drawings of them in popular stuff tend to be drawn in the ugly manners of a goblin or even fish-like creature, but that doesn't seem to always be the case. In fact, some describe them as more akin to sea fairies, and certainly their attitudes can be similar. In the story of Tewaki, sorry if I'm saying that wrong, they kill his father and kidnap his mother away to their house called Manawatane to rescue his mother and take revenge. It's not really clear whether they went to his house or he went to theirs, but Tewaki convinced them to stay in his presence whilst his brother and mother clogged up every window and hole in the building. In doing so, he kept them in past dawn, and they had no idea what was going on outside until the holes and windows were pulled away. The stuff blocking the holes and windows were pulled away, and the light came in to kill them. One version of the story actually has it that the Ponaturi turned his mother into a wood carving, which was an art that the Maori had not known. It was thought that they might have helped encourage or teach the Maori about this art. In another story, they sound even similar to European fairies, and in this they stole the bones of another hero's dead father to use to beat time whilst they were performing the magical arts. The hero listens in on the incantations and uses them himself to gain greater powers before killing their priests, regaining his father's bones, and then facing them down with his warriors. There's another slight fairy link. The god Atuatangara is said to have a horde of obedient servants that are linked to the Ponaturi. They are never named as such, but in one story, a chief's son drowns and Tangara takes the child down and turns them into a teko, a carved figure on the ridgepole above his house. When the chief swims down to the house, the woman trapped as a servant there tells him the inhabitants will return at sunset and they will likely be killed, and he will likely be killed by it. So this chief, Ruapupuke, waits and tricks them, setting fire to the house and stealing back several carvings. They're certainly a force to be reckoned with, and I have to admit, initially learning about these things, I found myself thinking of the trench dwellers in the DC universe, which feels even more possible with Mary now playing Aquaman. I was also writing some terrible fan fiction that was an evil mermaid had Halia thing, my practice writing a couple of years ago, and within it I used the kind of idea of the Ponaturi being akin to fairies and kidnapping others to develop the sort of mermaid monster I was writing about. They give an interesting alternative to the mermaids that's got a lot of potential. Certainly they're an interesting group and certainly make an interesting sea dweller, and in the Vale they're considered on the darker side, but not always problematic if their water territory isn't affected. So, side demonic, created by demons, created for to fight the mermaids and their compatriots and attack fishermen. Created when mermaids were created in the Vale. Physical description: half monstrous creatures, somewhat fish-like or sometimes even frog-like, mixed with human during the time in the water. Outside of the water, they are more akin to human, but pale-skinned, red hair, paired with long claws on their hands. Abilities: they're able to breathe on land, learn water, swim with speed, and hold magical powers that allow them to transform others as well as to enslave them. They are great warriors and can fight better than any other warriors thanks to their protective spells. Most known for kidnapping people from the coast who work for them. Weaknesses: they are weak to light, particularly sunlight and fire, and need to remain hidden during the daylight hours within the depths. Number unclear. There's thought to be probably around 1 million, as they tend to live in hordes. Well-known beings, no particular names, generally just hordes. Characters in stories: Brian or Tote, head of the Ponaturi around the Fallen Archipelago. Final comments: I know there's not much information there, but they are an interesting option and do make me think of a lot of stories of the sea dwellers that climb up onto land to fight. Certainly they remind me of the beings in The Croc and Awakes by John Wyndham, so they really are an interesting lot. Thank you for listening.